Hey guys, welcome back to A Page in the Chapter, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Paige and today we are doing the Contradictions Book Tag. Now this is essentially just a tag about all of the contradictions that we as readers have. You know, there's some authors we love but books by them that we hate, covers we love, books we hate, you know, that kind of vibe. You'll see the premise of the tag as we get into it. I will try and link the original creator down in the about section if I can find them, and you guys should definitely go and check out their version of this tag because it is theirs. We have a very vibey setup today, but I'm a little bit worried about setting my hair on fire. Won't lie to you. If you guys are a big fan of tags, then I try to do at least one every single month, so do feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below to stay tuned for future content and make sure that you guys are seeing those. I upload twice a week on a Wednesday and a Friday, so there is no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. And I also have all of my tags in a playlist entitled BookTube Classics, along with all the other like classic BookTube videos, so do feel free to check those out if you are interested. I feel like now though we should just get on into the questions so you can see what this whole tag is even about. So let me get out my trusty phone with the questions on it. Look how cute my new case is, it's skeletons doing yoga. I am obsessed with it. The first question is, well, the first prompt is, I love this genre, but I didn't like this book. The first book that comes to mind for this is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. And that's because this is a YA fantasy based on African folklore. And I am a sucker for YA fantasy, but I am especially a sucker for YA fantasy that is based on folklore. Like, especially a folklore that I'm not used to hearing about, that provides an opportunity for me to learn something. It is like my favourite subgenre of the subgenre. But this didn't do it for me. I really wanted to like it, but I just couldn't get into it, and I really struggled to understand what was going on. However, this book does have like fantastic reviews, so maybe I do need to give it another go. I did put it on a TBR to give it a reread last year, but it was when I was in that massive reading slump that I don't like to talk about. So obviously this never really got read. I don't know whether to give it another go. It has been 2 years since I read this book. It was on my TBR for the reading rush in 2020, so that's how long ago that I read this. But this is just the first one that came to mind, as I said, because I remember just being really bored and mainly really confused. But I'm normally an absolute sucker for learning about different mythologies. I want more books where I can learn about mythology. Like, it's just my favourite thing to learn about. Next we have I rarely read this genre, but I loved this book, and I have 2 picks for this. The first one is one of my favourite books of all time, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read this for school because I studied the Gothic genre and this was one of our set texts, but I have reread it many a time since leaving school. It's very rare to like read a book for school and like something that you're forced to read and study and actually love it so much that you continue to read and annotate it. How long ago did I leave school? 3-4 years ago now, so this book really stayed with me. I'm not one for classics. They normally bore me. I normally give them like max 3 stars. There's always like big chunks of classics that I don't understand. I might get like the bare bones of the plotline by the end of the book, but it's very rare for me to understand a book as easily as this one is to understand. I think if you're looking to start classics, this is honestly like a really good one to start with. It's really short. This book is like misleading because you've got the note on the text and the introduction and stuff like that, but the book itself is less than 200 pages. I highly recommend. And then the second book that I have chosen for this is Olive by Emma Gannon. I gave this book 5 stars. It was one of my top books of last year. I absolutely adored it, but I don't typically read these kind of books. This is very much like a contemporary finding yourself in your late 20s, early 30s. It follows our main character, Olive, and she has decided, or she's in the process of deciding, that kids aren't really for her and she doesn't want to have children. And it is about her kind of learning to navigate all of the stereotypes and the disdain from the people in her life, and like people like not really believing her, and it's very much about her like navigating this minefield that is your 30s when you don't want children but everyone you know has children, and maintaining those friendships. I don't typically read books about women that much older than me, I felt, you know, kind of hesitant going into this book because it's not something that I can really relate to, like yet anyway. I'm 21, this isn't something I really have to think about. I loved this book and I highly recommend it. I learned so much from this book that was so far beyond just women in their 30s not wanting children, and I feel like even reading it in my early 20s was a good time to read it. Like, I still think that I gained something from reading it, so I do love this book and highly recommend it. Next we have I love this trope, but I didn't love this book. I struggled a little bit with this one. I think normally if I love a trope, then I'll love the book. Sometimes it can be done, like tropes can be done poorly, but I don't know, there wasn't really a book that came to mind for this. So I've kind of twisted it a tiny bit. I love myths, I love retellings. I feel like there are a lot of Greek myth retellings that I don't love, but overall I would say that I do love them. You guys just see an unfair proportion on this channel. But I do love Greek myth retellings, and so I'm kind of taking that as a trope. I know it's not a trope. I'm gonna take it as one, and so then my answer for this would be A Song of Achilles. I wanted to love this so badly. It gets so much hype and everyone I know loves it. I genuinely don't think I've seen someone else dislike this book, but it just didn't work for me. I did learn a lot from it and I loved it for that. I don't know, I think at the time I was just coming off of a Percy Jackson binge, so maybe I was expecting this book to be more of a fantasy retelling, like more of a original retelling, because to me Madeline Miller's books, all of them, are just the stories from the Iliad but focused around like one person or two people, and she just pulls all the stories out and like words them in an easier way to read and then publishes it and makes loads of money. So maybe I need to give this one another go, but I just don't think it was for me. Next, following in the same fashion, we have a trope you hate but you loved the book. And so for me, my most hated trope in the entire world is love triangles. They really bug me to read. I don't want to spend the whole first book connecting with a character to then have to try and get over that and watch her spend the whole second book with someone else. I also think a lot of the times they can be very flat, and because there was such a focus on love triangles in the post-Twilight world, that there is a massive chunk of literature that is very much just, I'm in love with this one guy, and then like switch, no, I'm in love with another guy. And I just don't think that like love works like that. I think that there really needs to be some more nuance to the love triangle trope, and I really don't typically like it. However, there are two exceptions to this rule. Ironically, the first one is Twilight, because a couple years ago I reread the Twilight books and I realised that so much of the love triangle is not actually in the books. It has been completely pushed by Hollywood with the movies, and obviously to help the movies sell and to create hype. This whole Team Edward, Team Jacob is very much a Hollywood thing, and it's not actually in the books. Yes, Jacob is in love with Bella, but Bella is always 110% about Edward. She sees Jacob as a friend. The time that she spends with him is very much as a friend, and then the movies have just kind of exploited that friendship. But I don't actually think that it's as clear in the books, and I really like the way that it's done in the books, because there's that room to be like, is this a love triangle? But also you can very much just be like, she has a boyfriend and she has a best friend, you know? Like, I actually really like the nuance that is in Twilight. And then the second book that I think handles a love triangle really well is Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare and the whole Infernal Devices trilogy. There is a very big love triangle in the Infernal Devices trilogy, but I love it. Like, I love both of the characters. I can very easily see why she would be torn between the two. She spends enough time with both of them from the beginning to be a little bit confused. I will say, ending, little bit of a cop-out. It is what it is, you know? The last few pages of that book did make me sob. Love that book. It is my favourite Cassandra Clare book. I should hate it because of the love triangle, but something about it just works. Then we have I love this author, but I didn't love this book. We have to talk about one of the most recent, most disappointing books that I have read, and that is A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab one of my favourite authors of all time. She is a very like recent author for me, but A Gathering of Shadows, I gave it 2 stars. I really was not a fan of it. I felt like it took a major change from the first book, which is A Darker Shade of Magic. I felt like the 2 storylines were completely disjointed. Obviously I haven't read the 3rd book yet, so I don't know if a lot of the things that I thought were brushed over, maybe they come back around, maybe they're not brushed over, but there were a lot of things that our main characters did that I felt like should have had a lot of political consequences. And it was mentioned in the book that there were political consequences to this magic tournament that is the centre of the plotline of this book. And so then for them to do things where even I'm not the smartest, I won't lie, even I picked up on them and was like, maybe this should have some political repercussions, and that didn't happen. I was really let down by this book. I gave this book 2 stars. I was really sad. I previously disliked a book by this author, but I loved this book. And so now we need to talk about my very complicated feelings on Sarah J Maas. A Court of Thorns and Roses. I actually really enjoyed that book. It was when I read A Court of Mist and Fury that I became furious. That is the exact definition of the love triangles that I was describing to you that I hate earlier. The flat, 2-dimensional, I'm completely in love with this man, but now there's another guy on the scene and I hate the first man and I'm completely in love with the second man. Absolutely despised it, and so I've avoided Sarah J Maas ever since. However, I did read Crescent City, and Crescent City, book 1, House of Earth and Blood, second favourite book of 2021. But I'm now reading House of Sky and Breath, and I think it's really boring and I want to DNF it, and I'm not enjoying it at all. I don't think this book has anything interesting to read about in it, and it's 800 pages of nothing essentially. Next we have A Cover You Adored but a Book You Did Not, and once again I have 2, and once again they are exactly the same theme. We've come back around. These books have something in common. So we have Cersei and we have Ariadne. Clearly I really like kind of like foiling and a floral vibe with some shimmer and some like gold textures. I mean, I think both of these covers are absolutely stunning. The white version of Ariadne as well. The amount of times I've been tempted to purchase that book even though I know I didn't enjoy it. So these are obviously both Greek myth retellings. One follows Cersei and one follows Ariadne. I very much hated Cersei at the time, but this spring/summer I am very committed to rereading Cersei, because the problem was that I kind of went into this expecting a story, and Cersei is very much more like a character study. It doesn't have like one strict plotline, it's very much just like stories involving Cersei, exploring her potential feelings in these stories, and so it doesn't have like a strict plotline. It is more of a character study, and I think now that I know that, I could have a hell of a lot more fun with this book. It has absolutely perfect vibes for spring. I just think that I could really come around to this book now that I kind of know the gist and know what to expect going in. However, this book is a fat no. This is an Ariadne and Theseus retelling, and it's kind of sold as this feminist retelling. Ariadne, throughout the entire book, is at the mercy of men. She doesn't ever make a single decision for herself. I don't really know what about this is feminist. Her only like kind of feminist thing is that multiple times throughout the book she acknowledges that as a woman in Greek society her life is dictated by male gods and the men surrounding her, but she does nothing to change this, to overcome this. Every decision that she makes and every situation that she and her sister are in is dictated by a man. And it's also not an Ariadne and Theseus retelling. Like, everything about the branding of this book is incorrect. Whoever did the branding, I don't think you read it, hun. And if you did, then you read a very different book to the one that ended up being published. Both of these covers, absolutely stunning. Some of my favourite covers in existence. But I didn't like either of the books. And then the final question is, I don't like this cover, but I loved this book. So firstly, we have Tiger Lily, which is a Peter Pan retelling following the character of Tiger Lily. Be warned that if like Wendy is one of your favourite characters ever, maybe don't read this book because you'll come out of it hating her. But I read this book in one sitting, was absolutely obsessed with it, and I think this book could have done a lot better. This cover is not it. I only read this book because a friend gave it to me and they said I would love it. You know, I did, and they were right, but this cover makes it look really cheap. I don't think it gives away anything about the storyline. I don't think it's helpful, and I wouldn't say that Tiger Lily is like the most well-known character ever, so I think this cover needed more so that people see it and they go, oh, that's a Peter Pan retelling, because that's a huge selling point of this book and the cover doesn't really represent that. And then there's actually like nothing technically wrong with this next book's cover, but I just don't like it, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Adore this book. It is all told in interview style, so stylistically and the way it's written, it's a very different experience than your typical book, and it follows this band called Daisy Jones and the Six, and they were absolutely blowing up in the 70s, were at the height of their career, and then at their pinnacle they split up and they all kind of left the music industry, and this book is them being interviewed and people finally finding out the reason that it all broke down. And it's one of my favourite books of all time. Again, I will be doing another Taylor Jenkins Reid binge this summer because I adore her. She has just announced that Carrie Soto is back, is going to be her next book. It's set in the 90s and I cannot wait. Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favourite authors of all time, but something about this cover I just don't like neither of the covers, to be honest, I like. I don't know, I just think that it doesn't represent the book all that well. If I saw this and didn't know the hype that Taylor Jenkins Reid had, or if I hadn't read Taylor Jenkins Reid before, I'd probably see this cover and like think that the book was a bit cheap. I can't put into words what about this cover I don't like, but I just personally do not. And so that is my Contradictions book tag. I do hope that you enjoyed. Let me know some of your contradictions down in the comments section. I would love to know your answers to these. I think this is such a fun tag and I haven't actually seen anyone else do it. Yeah, let me know if you do it as well so I can watch it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. As I said earlier, if you enjoyed tags, you want to see more, I have a whole playlist for them, and you can hit that big red subscribe button down below to stay tuned for future content, because I upload twice a week on a Wednesday and a Friday, so there is no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. You can also check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Page and Chapter to see more of what I'm reading and reviewing as I'm reading it. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, you are enjoying everything that you are reading, and I will see you next week for my next video. Bye guys.